Alright, hello math fans. Alright, so we've learned how to use the substitution method, and now what we're going to be using is something called the elimination method. Some of you may have heard it called the addition method, but I don't like to use the addition method because sometimes you're adding and sometimes you're subtracting. So we're going to call it the elimination method. Okay, so this is to solve systems of equations. All right, so let me just start with an example here. You have x minus y is equal to 2, and 2x plus y equals 1. Now our goal here is to find one variable, or find one of the variables that will cancel. And what I mean by cancel is you're looking for opposites. So you're looking for the variable with opposites. What I mean by that is if I have 3y, the opposite of 3y is negative 3y. If I have negative 6x, the opposite of that is positive 6x. The opposite of y is negative y. Okay, so that's what I mean by opposite. So if I look at this equation right here, right away I have the y's are opposite. Okay? So if the y's are opposite, what I do is I draw a line underneath it, and I either add or subtract depending on what it is. So in other words, this is an x, this is a 2x. They're both positive, so it's x plus 2x is 3x. Negative y plus y cancels. It's why we call it the elimination method, because it actually cancels. Please do not write 0y. It's gone. That variable is gone, so the y's cancel, and 2 plus 1 is 3. And then I solve for x. Now, once I do that, I get x equals 1. So that's one answer. I need to take that, I need to plug it back into one of the two equations. It does not matter which one. Okay, it's not like substitution where you have to plug it back into, or you want to plug it back into one that's actually solved. In this case here, I plug back into the easier one. So plug into either equation, and you want to pick the easier. What I mean by easier is less negatives and smaller numbers. But it can be either one. So if you don't know, just plug it into one of them and solve. So in this case here, I'm going to pick this second equation because it has less negatives. It doesn't matter. Either one. It's got a bigger and it's got a 2, so it doesn't really matter what we do here. So I go 2 times 1 plus y equals 1. So I get 2 plus y equals 1. Subtract 2 from both sides. Come up here, and I get y equals negative 1. So there we go. That's my solution to this problem. It's 1 comma negative 1. And remember, you can always go back and check it. You plug it in. You have time to do it after a quiz or after a test, after you're done, to check it. Because if you get it wrong, the whole problem is wrong. So if I plug this back into the original problem, it's into these two equations, I would get 1 minus a negative 1, and that is 1 plus 1 is 2. So that works for the first equation. And for the second equation, 2 times 1 minus 1 equals 1, and 2 minus 1 does equal 1. So that's true also. Okay, so that works. So that's just the basic. Now I want to do one more example here. If I have 3x minus 3y is equal to 0, and negative 5x plus 3y equals negative 10. Once again, this is kind of solved for us. This is kind of a friendly one, so I'm going to start out with friendly ones. And then they get even a little more evil and nasty as time goes on. Okay, but the y's are opposite. So the y's are going to cancel, so you draw a line underneath here, and we call it the elimination because, again, this is going to be eliminated, and then it's 3x minus 5x. That's why you either add or subtract depending on what the sign is. So 3x minus 5x is negative 2x. That cancels, equals 0 minus 10 is negative 10. Solve for x, divide by negative 2, x equals 5. I plug it back into either one of the two. Now I'm personally going to plug it back into this first one because there's less negatives, the numbers look a little smaller. So 3 times 5 minus 3y equals 0. So 15 minus 3y equals 0. Subtract 15. We get negative 3y equals negative 15. Divide by negative 3. Y equals 5. So that's my answer. It's 5, 5. And check your work. Okay, let's try another one here. X minus 2y equals negative 10. And 3x minus y equals 0. Okay, with the first two that I did, it was eliminated right away. We didn't have to do anything. I want you to understand we can't just eliminate because we don't have opposites. So what we need to do is we need to multiply one of the equations by a number to give us an opposite. So I can choose whichever variable I want. I'm going to choose to eliminate the y. It doesn't really matter in this case. They're actually pretty similar. But I need to multiply one of these equations. And if you notice, this one's got negative 2y. The opposite of negative 2y is positive 2y. So I can multiply, the question is, what do you multiply this one by? What do you multiply negative y by to give me 2y? Well, I multiply it by negative 2. Right? Negative 2 times negative y is positive 2y. So I'm going to multiply the whole equation by negative 2. And some of you are saying, well, you can't just multiply by a negative or by a number. I mean, you're changing the whole equation. Well, let me just here. Let's look in the corner here. If I have 2x equals 8, you know already that x equals 4 if I solve it. What if I multiply the whole thing by 2? How does that change the problem? That gives you 4x equals 16. Well, x still equals 4. Okay, so it doesn't matter as long as you multiply the whole equation by that number, and it's got to be everything, then you're okay, you can do that. Okay, so let's finish up here. Negative 2 times 3x is negative 6x. Negative 2 times y is positive 2y equals 0. Because I multiplied the negative 2 times the 3x, negative 2 times the negative y, and negative 2 times 0, which is still 0. And then I just break the next one below it, x, or the one we didn't touch, x minus 2y equals negative 10. And now these cancel, which they're supposed to. If it doesn't cancel, you didn't multiply by the right thing. So we get negative 5x equals negative 10. Divide by negative 5, x equals 2. Plug it back in one of the two equations. I'm going to choose the second equation. So 3 times x, or 2, minus y equals 0. So 6 minus y equals 0. And I'm actually, I could subtract 6 and then divide by negative 1, but I'm going to add y to both sides. So I get 6 equals y, or y equals 6. So that's my solution. 2, 6. Okay, so let's try another one here. Let's do 3x minus 4y equals 7. and negative y plus 2x is equal to 3. Alright, the main thing here is you have to line the variables up. So this has got an x and a y, this has got a y and an x. You can't have it. The columns have to be the same. So you literally just move things around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip these two around because I like my x first. So I'm going to rewrite the top one, 3x minus 4y equals 7, and then 2x minus y equals 3. Now it's all in order. But notice the negative went with the y and the positive went with the 2x. Make sure signs are good. Alright. This is a bad choice. The x is a bad choice because you can't multiply something by 2 to give you 3. You can, but it's a fraction. You don't want to multiply anything by fractions. But what I can do is I can get rid of the 4 or the y. Okay? So I can multiply this. I'm trying to get this to be positive 4y. That's my goal. Well, what do you multiply by negative y to give you positive 4y? Well, you multiply it by a negative 4, because negative times a negative is a positive, so you get 4y. So that's what I'm going to multiply the whole equation by. So now I get 3x minus 4y equals 7, and 8x minus, or plus, it's negative 4y, negative 4. So it's negative 8x plus 4y equals negative 12. Okay, that cancels, which it should, and we get negative 5x equals negative 5. Divide by negative 5, x is equal to 1. Okay, plug it into one of the two equations. I'm going to choose the first equation. So we get 3 times 1 minus 4y equals 7. So 3 minus 4y equals 7. Subtract 3. Negative 4y equals 4. Divide by negative 4. Y equals negative 1. There you go. There's your answer. So it's 1 comma negative 1. All right, another example. So examples are good here. I want you to notice that all the problems I'm doing with the elimination method, the variable is not solved for, one of the variables is not solved. When you're doing substitution, that's the best time to do substitution is when one variable is already solved, because then you just plug that one back in. Okay, it's very important. All right, so here's the next problem. 3y is equal to negative 4x plus 8 and x minus 2y equals 13. Okay, well that you can tell right away it's completely messed up here. We got a y on this side and the x is on the other side. What we're doing, guys, is you want basically your x's and your y's in the same column, and you want it to be equal to whatever the number is. Okay. Now it can be x, it can be y, it could be a and b, it could be any letter, but you want it, usually it's alphabetical order, but you want them in the same column. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add 4x to both sides. That gives me 4x plus 3y equals 8, and x minus 2y equals 13. Now I have it all lined up. And what I want to do is I look and say, well, which one am I going to get rid of? I'm going to get rid of the x, because 3 and 2 are just nasty numbers to try and get something to work out where it's opposite. So I'm going to multiply this one by negative 4. So I get, rewriting the top one, I get 4x plus 3y equals 8, and negative 4x plus 8y equals negative 52. Okay, be careful of the bigger numbers. Make sure you multiply and you distribute that negative 4 with all the terms. Okay, very important. So the x's cancel, and we get 11y is equal to negative 44. Divide by 11, y is equal to negative 4. Okay, and then we plug it back into one of the other equations here. I'm going to plug it back into this equation. Okay, so I have x minus 2 times negative 4, because that's minus 2y, equals 13. So that's x, it's negative 2 times negative 4 is positive 8, equals 13. Subtract 8, x equals 5. So that's your answer. It's 5, negative 4. Be careful that, make sure it's always going to be x comma y, or if it's letters a, b, a comma b, it's usually in alphabetical order that you write in the point. All right. Well, let's look for something a little more complicated, because right now everything is working out pretty nicely here. We had to multiply one equation. Let's do a problem where we actually have to multiply two equations. So here's your next example. 2x plus 3y equals 1, and 5x minus 4y equals 14. All right, there is not one of the equations where I can multiply like the x to give me, I can't multiply something by 2x to give me 5x. I can, but again, it's a fraction, and again, it's nothing with, even with the y, I can't multiply 3y to give me 4y. That's a nice whole number. So what I'm going to do is I need to pick one of the variables, and then I want to eliminate that variable. Okay? And just to kind of give you a little hint, I'm going to choose the y. Now, what is the reason I'm choosing the y? The reason is because it's already plus and minus. I don't even need to multiply it by a negative. If I want to get rid of the x's, I would have to multiply one of them by positive something and one by negative something. So I don't want to do that. All right. So to get rid of the y, I'm looking for the number, the lowest common multiple that 3 and 4 go into. So 3 and 4, the lowest common multiple. And that's going to be 12. They both go into 12. It's the smallest number that they both go into. So my goal is to get one of them to be 12y and one to be negative 12y. That's my goal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this one by, obviously one's positive, one's negative already. That was the point of choosing the y. I'm going to multiply that by 4. And I'm going to multiply this one by 3. That'll give me, after I distribute the y's, that'll be 12y, and that'll be negative 12y. So if I distribute the whole thing, I get 8x plus 12y equals 4, and 15x minus 12y equals 42. Okay, so you get 23x, the y's cancel, is equal to 46. Divide by 23, x equals 2. So I plug it back into one of the others, so I'm going to plug it into the top one here. So 2 times 2, or 2x, plus 3y equals 1. So 4 plus 3y equals 1. Subtract 4 from both sides. 3y equals negative 3. Divide by 3. Y equals negative 1. So that's my answer. 2 comma negative 1. So that I had to eliminate multiply two equations to actually eliminate it. Okay, let's try another example. Four x plus 5y equals 7, and 6x minus 2y equals negative 18. Alright, so once again I can pick the x or I can pick the y to eliminate. I'm going to kind of go the same route. I'm going to pick that y again to eliminate because it's already positive and negative. So my lowest common multiple is 10. So one's got to be positive 10, one's going to be negative 10. So obviously this one's positive, so I'm going to multiply this one by 2, because 2 times 5 is 10, and this one by 5. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. So I get 8x plus 10y equals 14, and 30x minus 10y equals negative 90. Okay, so you have your calculator too. So you get 38x, that cancels, and we have negative 76. Divide by 38, x comes out to be negative 2. Plug it back into, I'm going to choose the top one because I have less negatives. So 4 times negative 2 plus 5y is equal to 7. So negative 8 plus 5y equals 7. Add 8 to both sides. 5y equals 15. Divide by 5. Y equals 3. So my answer is negative 2, 3. Okay, pretty reasonable. All right, let's do one more example. Okay, 10x plus 3y equals 7, and 15x plus 10y equals 5. Now these are kind of big numbers, and you can look at both of them. If I look at the y's, my lowest common multiple is going to be 30. That's kind of a lot to multiply by. So let's actually eliminate the x's. So we have 10 and we have 15. And we're trying to get a number that both 10 and 15 go into. Now we could say 10 times 15, because that's what most of the problems were, where you actually multiply them together. But that's kind of a huge number. I mean, you're looking at 150 between the two. That's a lot to multiply by. But if you guys realize that the lowest common multiple for this one, 10 and 15 both go into 30, that's actually pretty nice. So that's your lowest common multiple. So what we're going to do is we need one of these to be 30 and one to be negative 30. So we are going to multiply, and it doesn't matter which one's negative or which one's positive. So I'm going to multiply this top one by, to get that to be negative 30, and multiply it by negative 3. And to this one to be positive 30, I multiply this one by 2. So we get negative 30x minus 9y equals negative 21. And then, again, make sure you distribute with everything. With that 2 goes into all three terms. So I get 30x plus 20y is equal to 10. Okay, the x's cancel, and we get 11y is equal to negative 11. And again, do not mess up with your adding and subtracting. If you have to use a calculator to check it, do it, but don't make a mistake. So negative 21 plus 10 is negative 11. So we divide both sides by 11, and we get y is equal to negative 1. Plug it back in one of the two. I'm going to choose the top one because it has smaller numbers. So 10x plus 3 times negative 1 equals 7. So 10x minus 3 equals 7. Add 3 to both sides. So 10x equals 10. Divide by 10. X equals 1. So your final answer is 1, negative 1. Okay, So that's it, algebra fans. Just remember that the elimination method is actually a really convenient method. It doesn't have to, like the substitution method, you always had to find something to solve for. And basically, I mean, if you look at this equation, at these two equations here, there is nothing to solve for. If I solve for x or y, I get nasty fractions. So elimination method actually allows me to pretty much solve any type of equation. So that's actually one that's kind of favored a lot is the elimination method. The only time you'd use substitution is if something is already solved. Like if I had y equals 2x plus 7 and 2x plus 3y equals 105. Well, I'm definitely using substitution, and I'm substituting that y right into there and then coming up with an answer. Okay? Because if you had to do elimination method, you could, but you'd have to subtract 2x from both sides and then solve it that way. Okay? But that's it, and I hope you learned something. Goodbye, algebra fans.